Hello and welcome everybody. And we're having the final episode in this series of Leadership Talks Series 1.3. And this we're going to talk about the growth and how we can help the individual thrive in the workplace. With us today in this conversation, we have our global HR experts with us again, and I'm starting with Nicole Barrow. She's head of HR CSI, Customer Solutions and Innovations for the Americas region of the Deutsche Post DHL Group. Then we have Kathleen Procario, head of HR Americas for Badardi, the largest spirit company in the world. And then we have Kathleen Halligan, who works with, she works with a leading HR firm in Ireland, serving global clients such as ASL Aviation, and she's headquartered in Dublin. And then we have our co-host again, Jordan. Jordan is a good friend and a colleague, the author of Workplace Warriors, People Skills for the No Bullshit Executive. And so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cellene Hoogenkamp. I'm the founder of Global Spirited Leadership. So back to the question.
Quick question, Cellene.
Yes.
Didn't you write a book as well?
Thank you. Yes, I did last year, and I'm in the process of reviewing it and sort of adjusting it to these more turbulent times. So I'm talking about leadership and teams and how you get the best teams. And of course, with this period, there is additional skills and attention needed. So thank you for the question, Jordan.
What's the name of your book?
Well, the title is going to change, but the current title is The Key to World-Class Teams Performance. But I'm looking for a new title. So any inspiration, please share it with me. So to the question of today is how do we help the individual thrive? And in this currently uncertain time, I hope all of us are surviving. But some people we talk about are thriving, right? So what is the difference? And I'm going to throw it open to all of you to just now, and we're all on the same screen, hooray, that we have this conversation about what is the difference between thriving and surviving? How do you see it? What do you see in the workplace? How do you manage a person who is barely surviving into thriving? What are we noticing? What resources do we use? So I'm throwing it open to you. Who wants to kick it off?
So I'll kick it off. For me, and it's so separate. So someone that's surviving, especially in these times, is someone that's kind of going through the motions, right? Someone that's and probably some of the more physical signs could be they could be a little withdrawn, tired, kind of low energy. But the person that's literally just, yep, I got through the day. So really, I attribute it to going through the motions. We're on the other side of that. Someone that's thriving, probably a little more energetic. They're definitely engaged. They're proactive. They're checking in. You see them, their activity as it goes, and it has nothing to do whether they're introverted or extroverted, because that plays a part as well. But you definitely see a marked difference between somebody that's surviving and thriving, in my view.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Kathleen. There you go.
No, I was just going to say to pick up on that, what I've noticed as well is very interesting is that some people who were thriving in the office environment are now surviving in the virtual world, and vice versa. There's people who were surviving in the office or thriving in the virtual world, because it's appealing to different personalities, and it's appealing to different styles, and having greater autonomy for some people has just been a real igniter of their contributions and their performance, whereas for other people, having that routine and structure taken away is now, bringing them to that space of surviving. Like, how do I navigate through my day without it having been as structured as it used to be?
I think if I were to build on that, I think our conversation has shifted to seeing that people go through this at different times, right? If we started in March, April, even myself, I've had periods where I was really in survival mode versus thriving. And if you even think about what's happening in the world with, at least in the US, the election being next week, like people this week, we noticed people were a little bit, you know, stressed out, and a lot of, and you can see it in just the little things of like, maybe their calendar is totally booked, or it's that energy that you see on screen, or if their camera's not even on. So I think just knowing that there are different peaks and valleys, I think that that's what we've been trying to talk about in our culture of just talking about it too, so everybody stays aware.
Mm.
So
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious for the three of you. One of the issues that comes up for me as a consultant is that the states have different laws about how you react when you see somebody who you think is upset. And there's a lot of stuff in the literature right now around how managers have to connect personally. And I'm curious what your experience is. I recently had someone ask me, what do you do if somebody says, I'm really depressed? And to which I responded, and the context was we were talking about the law, to which I responded, I'm not an attorney, I'm not an HR executive, but why not ask, is there anything I can do, or are you okay? And I'm curious as to what the three of you think. What are the limits? Are you seeing issues with picking up on people who are surviving or not surviving, particularly when you're a little worried about how they are, and, you know, for instance, extreme, whether they might be suicidal or something like that?
So for me, that made it an easier scenario than probably a typical scenario, because the person has opened up to the manager. They've kind of opened the door. You know, you don't want to cross a line of someone's privacy, and that's whether it's a legal situation or not a legal situation, manager, employee, just a human, on a human level, you don't want to cross into somebody's privacy. And I always tell the managers that don't be so held up by, you don't want to do anything because you don't want to affect the law. Be mindful and be kind. But the fact that the employee will have reached out to say that I think that I'm depressed, then that is the key for the manager to say, like you said, oh my goodness, is there anything that I can help you with? What support do you need? In most large companies, small as well, there is an employee assistance program. So there are resources out there, and whether they're established programs or not, then I would reach out to your local HR expert or executive or business partner to say, hey, what resources do we have? What can we do to support the employee? So, and usually the employee tells you what they need. They really do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, Nicole, how is your relationship now? Is it the same with your assistant programs, or have the briefings changed, or is their attitude or their information changing?
You know, what's interesting for me in the last several months, we've always had very good feedback about our employee assistance program, so that hasn't changed. But I tend to find or hear more employees asking for the resources than I ever have before, ever. In my years of being in HR, I've had far more people raise their hand to say, hey, what's the number? I want to connect, what's the benefit? So they're asking, and they're actually, even though those that are not specifically asking for employee assistance programs, they're reaching out to me, raising their hands, to their manager, they're asking for help. So they're looking for connection. I find mostly they need someone to talk to that's not their family members. And that's another thing I was going to say about thriving and surviving. So the people that are at home and they're with families, so you're constantly around the same people all the time. And obviously everybody loves their family, but sometimes they just need a bit of an escape. They need an air that's probably not as close to home. And in my organization, we're a commercial group. They're used to living on planes. So the fact that their wings are clipped, they're kind of going out of their minds. They miss travel. Who would ever believe that someone would say, I miss flying? Every commercial person I speak to says, God, I miss flying. I miss talking to the customer face to face. So it's connection they crave.
Yeah.
So Kathleen.
I mean, I'm seeing the same thing, particularly with our commercial folks. They're jumping out of their seats. And that I've even made some suggestions like, can you they're used to like watching a movie when they get on that plane. It's the decompression they're not getting. I've made some suggestions or provided articles around that. So yeah, I think we're seeing some of the same stuff. In terms of EAP, we have seen a bit of an increase. I think the overarching question of like, you know, prying into someone's life, or if someone were to come forward, I think the overarching theme in my mind is doing it with empathy and a little bit of transparency, right? So you're in a great spot if somebody is coming to you about it, but you know, in that scenario, I probably would say something like, "Thank you for sharing that with me. Tell me more," or, you know, just to open it. It's always about how you do something. It's, you know, so that it's not. And if you're bringing your whole self and doing that actual human connection, it's not a violation, right? That's the whole point. And even in the conversation of connection is, you know, that's what everybody's missing. So I think it all ties together.
Yeah. Also, early in the COVID, there were a lot of articles that came out. I think one of them was Harvard Business Review, if I'm remembering correctly, where they were encouraging people. It was, how do you run a virtual meeting? And the article would say, start off for the first 15 minutes and have everybody on the meeting say how they are and anything they need from everybody else. And that strikes me as somebody who's really worried about the law might be worried about that. So I'm just throwing that out. That by the way, the reason this came up is I was interviewed also on somebody else's podcast and got asked this, and then I had a client ask me. So I think it's out there more than we think. So
I think what we kind of noticed with that as well is that people possibly who aren't comfortable in having those sort of conversations are more likely to question, is it okay for me to do this? Because that could be a reason for me not to do it. And under the law, you can't be asking those questions. Well, the law doesn't specifically say that, you know. So, but sometimes when we feel uncomfortable about something, and I noticed that, I'm not sure if the GDPR legislation is as strong in the US as it is in Europe, but at the moment, if you ask anybody anything, your email address, or under GDPR, you know, we have to be careful about that. So it's almost like I'll use this statement because it protects me in all eventualities, you know, versus like you're saying, Jordan, is not that a great thing to open up a meeting and just say, everyone have a bit of chat, and you're not asking people to unveil, you know, their deepest, darkest home secrets, but how are you doing, how are you getting on? And it's all about the spirit of the law rather than the letter of it. Yeah, certainly that's what I would know, is it's more the people who are anxious about going to that place who are more likely to invoke the notion that perhaps this is not a legal thing to do.
Yeah. I was reading an article the other day, I think it was Gartner Research, and it did show up that there is a huge shift since COVID started amongst HR people, that 70% of HR executives are now more concerned about the people's emotional and mental well-being than their physical well-being, which is an interesting shift from last year, where everybody was like, oh, you have to stay fit, etc. And hardly we had, or not, conversations about, you know, how are you mentally? We're not asking the question, but about their emotional well-being. And so, I mean, for me, people have been working virtually for many, many years. You know, that's not new. But what is new, I think, is this another stress of how long is this COVID going to last, and the uncertainties of it. So I don't think it's as much the working from home that creates the mental the mental added stress, but it's the external political social unrest that are creating the extra stresses. What are your thoughts about that?
There's so many things. Go ahead, Kathleen.
I was just going to say, I think even just the isolation, right? Like that you are confined to your home to some
That's
degree.
the isolation.
Yeah, I think that adds on, and to your point of HR professional, I mean, that's really what we're doing all the time behind the scenes. Besides the actual tactical work of taking care of things, those are the discussions we're having. We're like rolling out how to talk to your people. To your point of, people have anxiety, they're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing, and we have put together an entire toolkit with like references and how to have a dialogue. I mean, you would think you wouldn't have to do that, but that's how we can support them, right? If HR is here to support the organization, this is what the organization is going through, the people are going through. And so that's what we went to do, was to help kind of demystify and show that it can be very easy. It can be simple questions. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. And I think everybody's anxiety is just feeding into that.
So maybe the upshot of COVID is that we are also making our people better people persons.
I think so.
If we consider benefits of COVID, I think those are some of them. We definitely have more connection with our family members, our friends, our co-workers, our colleagues. So it's forced. But to go back to what you were saying before, Cellene, when you were asking about people have been working at home for years. I'm someone that in a former life, I used to be a permanent telecommuter. So I worked from home 100% of the time. And I was very productive at doing it. And I found that fast forward to this year, I work in an office, I go into the office. So when I started to work from home, I never fully adjusted to working from home this time. I always knew that it's like I had one foot in the door. I didn't actually set up in my office, which I have an office. I kind of worked at the kitchen counter. And after the first 2 months and you're trying to get everybody settled and stuff, I found myself wondering, oh my goodness, and I live alone, so I don't have the distractions that some people already have with kids and family members and life. And I just could not fully adjust, mentally connect. So I was going through, I would say I was surviving. I was going through the motions, a part of that. And my workaround was going into the office, and that was the best thing for me. Completely moved, it shifted everything, my thinking, my motivation, all of it. So when I think of your question, has everybody works from home, that's not new. Now you're forcing them to work from home. And in addition to that, you have all of the political unrest and the COVID on top of that. And you can't even go out for coffee, and you're afraid to go into restaurants. And then there's a mask now, and then on top of that, you're homeschooling your kids. You're homeschooling your kids and taking care of your family. Plus, you still have to work. It's a lot. It is a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah.
So I think, what it reminds me of is I think just there's been a trend around agility in general, leadership agility. And I think COVID really pushed us into that, whether it's, change agility, people agility, that it becomes the number one thing that you're looking for in talent, is like how people adapt and change and shift. That's performance in a lot of ways. And I appreciate that it's moved into the EQ space a little bit more for that humanization, which we all know makes better leaders anyway, but I think it's going to push everyone else.
And I think, when you think on top of it as well, a bit to what you were saying there, Nicole, about your own preferences for, I guess, what energizes you, and it almost taps into personality preferences, like the typical introvert personality type versus extrovert personality type. And I think sometimes they get confused in their interpretation of a stereotype, but it's more about where do you get your energy from, and people with an extrovert preference are energized from the world outside. And so when that, we can't really touch it or feel it, but there's energy that comes from people when you're interacting with them that, releases the endorphins and kind of gets people going, versus people with that introverted preference who energize from within. So them having to stay at home and work for the duration or whatever, that's probably why they're thriving, because gosh, I get to, kind of plug myself in and energize from within, versus other people who are just struggling because they're not, even though you get on your Zoom and you can have lots of people on it, you're not getting that real energy. I don't have a word for it, but it's something that exists when we're in a space with other people that lets us know that person isn't quite themselves, or, there's a little look or a little emotion or something that helps us be sensitive to how other people might be feeling. So I think things like that become more difficult, when we're talking about the theme of thriving and surviving, and what things can we do to help those people more, I suppose, to get them to a space of thriving.
Actually, what comes up in the conversation for me is that I used to have this question every day, like, okay, check in, am I thriving or am I surviving? It's like, how do you remember the last year was like, it was so important to get people from surviving to thriving. And now with the whole environment changed, it's like, well, surviving, how do we get people to survive? And yet some people are thriving. And so I think by our conversation today, I'm actually motivated to put that question back into my front of mind for myself and say, what can I do today to be of most value? Like, what can I do right now that would be most valuable, that would make the most difference? What can I focus on right now that would be, the best for me, or how I can help somebody in my household? Sometimes it is like unloading the dishwasher, and we're multitasking much more. But it's like, okay, let's stop and ask myself that question. And sometimes how I get my energy is from outside. I need to be outside. So being, the restrictions. I'm so glad my gym is open with the restrictions. But for me, it's like get on my pedal board and go supping. That's how I recharge my batteries. I do need that alone time, and then I be charged up again when I talk with other people. So I am motivated by this question again to ask myself every day: am I surviving? Just checking in, and then what can I do about it?
So one of the things for me is it hasn't really changed for me. And I will admit to the world, I'm 68 years old, and I've been working on what I refer to as my gremlin for the last 40 years. And the gremlin is by the way, there's a book called Taming Your Gremlin, which I highly recommend.
Good book. It's a good book.
So there's a voice in your head that for most of us, if we weren't severely abused as children, that voice has our best interest at heart, but it's always sort of reprimanding us for not doing the right thing because we really want to be better, et cetera, et cetera. And it takes a while to be able to recognize that voice and know what's right or not right about it. I joke around and say, oh, okay, brain, thank you for sharing, but I've made a different choice. And one of my experiences, I do a lot of work with abrasive executives. So they tend to be driven in that way. And one of the big deals is that they have to learn how to deal with that voice in their head and have a different voice. And that's really part of mindfulness and all of that. And I'm kind of wondering if you all are doing mindfulness programs and, what you're seeing with your EAP doing that sort of thing.
We have a big focus now on mindfulness, probably more, and I think it's always been there, but I think we've made a concerted effort this year, certainly, to highlight it and communicate it and stuff. So our benefits group has done a really good job with doing that. But I think I mentioned it on one of the previous series, maybe the last one, that, even for something in our small group, I had started hosting for the Americas meditation sessions, which I would never have thought, if you asked me 2 years ago, would I be offering virtual meditation to my commercial group in CSI? I would have said, you're crazy. And now it's funny, I did it as a pilot just to see who would show up. And in my mind, I had, thinking in my mind, okay, these are the people that I know will show up, and I've had conversations with them before, and these are the people that are interested in. I could never have predicted how many people would show up, how many people raise their hands, and how many people have asked this to be an ongoing thing, like doing it more frequently than a one-time thing. So they're asking for it. They need it. They found it so beneficial. So definitely.
Do you have abrasive executives showing up in your meditation groups?
Me? Never.
Yeah.
My executives are angels. But the people that are probably a bit more high strung and go and go get that sale and stuff like that, they are also the ones that are saying, yeah, I'm going to attend. I'm super surprised by the reaction. And they're the ones that you're coming back to and saying, yeah, it's super beneficial. Can we do this again? We need more time zone offerings and stuff. So it's great.
Yeah, we very similar. We have a lot of offerings, but we actually right away we launched a SharePoint site called Keeping Your Balance, and so it included beyond EAP, which we have, and our EAP is an international one that has in different languages all of these resources already. So yes, we've been advertising that. It's at the front of all of our intranet sites and everything. But and then there's this SharePoint site that takes you through just a couple different areas, right? So it talks through kind of the mindfulness. It takes us through just even like performing at your best during this time. We've even done some podcasts with our internal employees talking about how they've managed through the stress. You know, again, it's another way to connect without connecting, and just trying to find ways to kind of create it in this new space. But it's been a huge hit. We've had like thousands of hits on it, which is the most successful kind of program we've rolled out. And I mentioned earlier that we now have like this toolkit that's coming out of it, so that it has live links in it that references back to the SharePoint, so that it's making it very digestible for people to find what they're looking for. I even with my, we were talking about it earlier, but even with my direct reports, I kind of changed our weekly dialogue a little bit about like what's in your way and what did you feel really good about this week. And what I learned in that is that the thing that they felt really good about was that they made progress, right? Before we were having these like ongoing conversations of task lists and like everybody was just surviving and like getting through it. But when we changed the dialogue, it helped them to back away, to then think a little bit differently. It kind of pulled them out of their ruts, which was great. I mean, it was really simple to just change the questions. So there's so many things that we can do if we're just paying attention, which is what I love about mindfulness. And I also like, my favorite is the Calm app. You can get it for free, but you can also just pay $60 a year. And it even teaches you how to do mindfulness. Like there's a training, there's sleep stories. I love the sleep stories because I'm struggling to sleep, but it's not for any other reason than a lot of energy that I have. So I highly recommend it.
So those sleep stories are stories they tell you so you fall asleep? Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Like Alice in Wonderland and...
Yeah. And it's very calm. And, you know, I'm usually out in about 2 minutes. There's one about gratitude. The gratitude thing is actually come up in a lot of different ways, even in our marketing strategies, because so many people are feeling that way. Like, you know, I talk about the gift of COVID, and I think, right, if you position it that way and you continue to think about it that way, I think the world is looking at, you know, our crisis in the same way.
Absolutely.
Interesting. So I am mindful of our time. So as we always do, to wrap it up with the key takeaway. What is everybody's key takeaway from this? Who wants to start?
I'll start. So I think just for individuals to take a pause for themselves, maybe it links to what I've said in previous sessions, but to take a reflection of yourself and get a sense of what makes you thrive, what makes you tick. So now that you've experienced both types of worlds, which pieces do you like from both worlds, and use that to create, when we get back to whatever normal is, or, you know, back to not being restricted, to be ready to co-create with your employer what will be the best working scenario for you.
I think for me, two things is one is of course is energy, like check in with my energy every day where it is, because your energy internally is also what you project. And so the energy flow for myself in the household is an important barometer. The other takeaway for me is the idea about demystifying the language around emotional and mental well-being. It's something we never used to address, and now it is becoming more accessible to be talked about. And that is a takeaway in the sense that it's an easier thing to be brought up in the conversation. And so I think, as to Kathleen's point, the expectation that people's EQ is probably on the increase.
Yep. For me, to moving people or being aware of people who are surviving versus thriving, I think the main thing is connection, right? As an individual, be connected to yourself, really know what it is that you want or don't want, and try to ask for help. Whatever you're feeling is kind of okay, which sounds very HR, but at its simplest form, that's what it is. And certainly as a leader, connect with your employees. In the past, you don't, you find that, people are in their separate directions trying to get the work done, and we don't, if out of sight, out of mind. Make a concerted effort to make sure you're reaching out to everybody. And sometimes it's not about, hey, what's the status of this assignment, but it is just, hey, how you doing? So I think those check-ins, whether it's formal, informal, WhatsApp, whatever it is, just to find out how your people are doing, especially those that are probably a little more introverted, that may not be comfortable in raising their hands. Yeah. Check in and say, hey, how you doing? How can I support you? I think those make a huge difference.
I really love the connection point. I think that's really key, but I think building upon it, and for me, it's really just the awareness. I've had some dialogues around, HRs are, we have a profession of observing behavior and being aware. And I think this is a time where, to everyone's point, that everybody's become more aware and becoming better leaders for it in the daily interactions, in whatever it is, that we're always connecting back to who they are as an individual. I think that's great. I mean, I think it's a great evolution for the conversation and dialogue of just the journey. So.
And for me, being one of those former leaders who was experienced as abrasive and working with a lot of them, for me, it's not about changing all of that. It's not about being 100% different, but it's about being 10% different, 15% different, just a little bit more sensitive to how you're saying things, and perhaps saying, I wouldn't be doing my job supporting you if I didn't give you a piece of feedback, as opposed to, why did you do that? And etc. So.
Well, thank you all for sharing that. And I just wanted to say, as this is the last of our series of leadership talks, I just really want to thank the panel for their showing up for all 3 sessions, for their commitment, for their participation, for their wonderful faces on the screen. And I'm really grateful that you helped me make this experiment work. And I think having all of us on the same screen make the round the table conversation easier. Thank you all for watching. And I think each of all of us here on the panel would love for you to stay in contact. Drop a note to the panel people if you have any questions about them. And well, please stay tuned for the next Leadership Talk series in November. And have a good Halloween. Well, I know it's Halloween tomorrow, so Kathleen, go and celebrate. If you want to show your costume, can you flash your costume?
You really want to see?
Yeah, I think that's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you guys, and stay in touch and stay connected. And I think wonderful to be being on the panel with you. Thanks for your help.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.